What's good? It's your Grayson, Aerosmith, Joey, and today, I'll be reading a story that I'm writing right now. It doesn't have an official title yet, but the placeholder name is The Lives of Destiny spin-off, The Ones Who Fled. I'm gonna change the name, for a reason, because I feel like changing the name to something else will fit the plot better. I don't feel like The Ones Who Fled is perfect. But anyways, yeah. I've written a lot. I'll say that. This is on my school laptop. On my Word document. So, like, let's just get straight into it. We're gonna be here for, like, 2 or 3 chapters. The lengths of the chapters are, like, as long as, like, a regular, like, lengthy novel. So expect a lot of time. Alright. Let's go into this. When the world of ice and snow has been inhabited, the defenders of the world must colonize and protect their land from the approaching enemy Amira. Local velociraptors also inhabited these lands, and have been at war with the Draysons for eons, ever since their species emerged. Long ago, the Swords have come to realize how territorial and even violent the Draysons can be, so they started an ongoing conflict that would last up to the days of the team's prime existence. If you don't know already, the team is like the friends and the Lives of Destiny. You have to watch the video I made about like the summarized version of Lives of Destiny to know what the team is. Anyways, on to the story. Chapter 1. Ambush. It was a bright, clear day among the towering, snowy, and rocky mountains that could be deadly spikes if put on the tip of spears. A large, scaling, snowy, and rocky ravine winded between the mountains. Its steps stretched an extra 100 feet below, where the flat surface would be if it had one. Orange and yellow creatures with Orange and yellow creatures with wings darted through the paths of the ravine, flying at Mach speeds. There were 3 of them, flying like bullets along the ravine's bottom. They looked like rabbits, but with dragon wings, claws, and horns. But they also looked like they could stand on 2 legs rather than 4. They had yellow hair, each being different styles, and waved along the speeding wind like they were inside of a tornado. The one in the front had straight hair that went down to the neck, emerald green eyes, and wore only brown closed underwear. Another had a short spiky cut with light blue eyes, and also only wore brown primitive underwear. And the last one was braided in a single large strand behind her head with the red eyes, and she also wore the same ancient brown underwear, also wearing a brown cloth around her chest. A sharp turn to the right in the cavern was coming, as the leading Drayson quickly spread out their wings and flapped them to dart right as the other 2 followed. For a brief second, upon them flapping their Drayson wings to go supersonic speeds, the yellow webbing of their wings illuminated before fading out after the turn. A white, airy cone shape that looked like a barely visible cloud also briefly tailed the Draysons as they darted right to go supersonic yet again. The leading Draysons squinted their eyes down the long and narrow trench to spot a distant cave entrance as their mouths slightly opened, revealing their rabbit teeth in front with big sharp fangs along the side of the small buck teeth. The fangs were thrice the size of their front teeth. From one second, it was a bright, clear day among the mountains. Now it suddenly got dark as they darted through the cave entrance and navigated their way through the systems. There were sudden rocky obstacles that the Draysons flawlessly flew round in the dim-lit caves, which had glowing red crystals inside. The 3 split off, as they each through different holes in the cave's wall. They reunited after exiting each smaller cave that led into a massive den with waterfalls spilling out from the sides of the den and down to the body of water covering the entire ground of the cave den. There were many grassy platforms above the water that served their own purpose. Most of them have vines hanging from above, which has glowing yellow berries growing from those vines, illuminating the area in a brighter dim light than the red crystals, but still somewhat dark. The body of the water was barely visible in the darkness. The three Draysons flew over the platforms, which had other Draysons doing their own things and living their own lives, as they entered another entrance in the back of the den with a mossy threshold that led to a slightly smaller den with a large body of water below and a rocky platform on the other side, showing two royal thrones side by side each other. On those thrones were two other Draysons. The one on the right was huge in size and had glowing red eyes with slightly angered expression on his face. The one on the left had glowing light blue eyes, who was a bit smaller than the king, but the queen was still decently larger than all the other Draysons by about a foot. The king was about 2 feet larger than all the others. The leading Drayson of the squad landed on the royal platform, followed by the other two. All three kneeled down at the same time as the leader of the squad spoke. King Renethus, Queen Sapphirus, I have news. What is it you speak of, Rune? Renethus asked in a deepish, clear voice. The swords. They are going to strike late at night. They have created new weapons. No such things has ever harmed us in all these years we have existed. We can brave through the bullets and live to tell the tale. All due respect, sir. These new weapons seem to be very destructive. While spying, I saw what they can do. Rapid firing purple flares obliterating rose steel pipes with minimal effort. They had red flares that, when shot at a tank, have exploded into an oblivion. Our skin may not be so resistant to these new firearms. The king had a face that read slight concern, but was more surprised and raised his eyebrows like he just won an argument and feels pride for it. Well, you shall double your efforts. Now go and prepare your people. Take Raz and Miriam with you. You will remain hidden on mountain summits until they strike. Fly down at them and give them everything you got. Let's go! The king shouted. The queen turned to look at Renethus with slight disturbance, but turned her head back forward to stay in her royal posture. Rin paused for a moment to understand everything with a worry on his face. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. The three Draysons, Rune, the one who was just talking, Rez, and Miriam flew away from the thrones and back out to the main den. Queen Sapphirus turned to look at her husband. You seem a bit more tense than usual, Ren. I don't think we should be underestimating so much about what the swords can do. Barely any one of us has died to the swords for all thousands of years we've been in this kingdom for. All of us will either die from old age, illness, or a natural accident. It would be impossible for the swords to develop such high tech in a very short amount of time. If I did think this was an actual threat, I wouldn't have sent them out to sneak attack tonight. Renethus answered, and he continued. We are nearing the end of this phase of the war. New official boundaries of each other's lands will be settled in a matter of weeks, and we would have a temporary peace before they keep trying to take our crystals. They always do. Queen Sapphirus then said, I thought of having a child. Renethus looked Sapphirus's way in wonder as she continued. They would have the strength and might like you. And they would have your wisdom and intuition, King Renethus finished. Maybe someday I could teach the child how to fly and have them meet your brother? Venetisk? No. I mean, he is a nice guy. Just doesn't like to train kids to defend for themselves. He's more of a machine builder, troubleshooter. I could take care of the child in that regard. Any names you've been thinking of? Well, a few. If they're a boy, Timothist. And if a girl, Shemathist. What do you think? I don't mind Shemathist if she's a girl, but if he's a boy, he needs to have a more powerful name than just Timothist. Something epic would do, like Zutchikist. Yikes, no, Ren, that name means Drayson Killer in our formal language of Mirren, referring to when Draysons used to kill each other long ago to survive like savages. Fine. But the child will have Thist as the second half of their name, because it runs with my side of the family. Regardless of their gender, they will have the name of strength in their name. Alright, I agree on that. Our child must be strong, not just in the physical form, but also in their mind. But anyway, you should get going. Lead your warriors to victory, Sapphiros said as Renethus spread out his wings ready to fly. Don't worry about any of this. I know what to expect, and it's not going to be any worse than all the other attempts they tried. Renethus flapped his dragon wings and flew out from the royal den and through the main living den. And he flew out into the cave systems and past the very dim-lit red crystals. He finally flew out the cave's entrance and into the ravine. It was dusk. The sky was blue but dark. The mountains were still visible in all of their glorious detail, but the brightness of the surroundings has dimmed significantly. Renethus flapped his wings strongly to fly upwards toward the clouds about to invert around the same height as the mountain summits. He began to loop and started to go upside down, then began to descend straight down and pull up again. But before becoming level again, he spread out his wings as the yellow webbing glowed so bright it was like the sun, and suddenly he darted going past 6 mountains per second as a powerful wing flap that sent him to Mach 5. A constant cone-shaped cloud followed Renethus, occasionally vanishing and reappearing. He saw one of the Drayson strike squads on top of the summits and spread out his wings to break and slow down using the wings. Then he dove down to the left and landed on top of one of the several thousand spiky mountaintops of snow. Renethus landed and stood behind his spy squad and spoke. If you want to stay hidden, you gotta get under the snow. Our colors are the most visible to all the others, he advised as he dug under the snow, using his right wing to swiftly cut an open hole in the snow to duck into. Some others did the same thing and covered snow on their heads to remain invisible. Only their eyes and some parts of their face along their eye level were not covered in snow. They waited and stared down the canyon the soars normally take to get from base to base. So they waited and waited and waited for nearly an hour, as it was now night. All the mountains were towering silhouettes among the very dark navy blue sky, scattered with stars. If the sky were totally black, you wouldn't be able to tell where both the sky and the mountains were. Rune, who was with his group of Draysons on the mission along with his 2 others, finally saw something in the far distance from the snow. 2 pure white lights were like dots from being barely visible at the other end of the canyon, between the mountains that were now invisible. Headlights, Rune thought in his mind. They're here, Raz called out. Alright, Once they drive by this very mountain, we will swoop down and take them out. They may have a few weapons, but don't let that stop us from claiming our victory, Renethus briefed to his other warriors. Aye, everyone chanted at once. Then Renethus ordered, now quiet down, they're almost close enough where they might hear us. The army of Dracens covered in pitch-black snow saw the headlights grow bigger as the patrol vehicle got closer by every minute. Even though it would still be a while before they drove by, the Dracens were ready for attack as they kept silent. They were just as silent as space, with the only sound around them being the winds being carried through the mountain tops, blowing the unseen snow around, possibly causing a mild snowstorm down below. The white rectangular headlights began to blur as the snow started to blow fairly intensely down in the canyon's route, but they were nearing the mountain the Dracens were on. The armored car in pure silver metal trekked through the now heavy snowstorm in the canyon, the only thing lighting the way being the blaring headlights. From inside, the road couldn't be seen at all. Only white blurs could be visible from inside the armored car. Two swords sat beside each other, one in the driver's seat, one looking at a GPS and radar system on a monitor attached to the right side of the black dashboard. No lights in the car were on at all, apart from small screens from inside the car that only illuminated a tiny area, such as the swords' faces. They looked like velociraptors, but if they had gray and tan fur growing out from their scaly skin. From the neck down, everything else was covered in military armor and equipment. The one sitting in the passenger seat held a rifle that looked more like a shotgun. It was very rectangular and only had one barrel. The gun also had two smaller rectangular prism-shaped parts on both sides of the rifle's barrel. There was one more sword in the back seat row, who was faced backwards in the chair facing out the back window. The back window had a turret sticking out from the back of the armored vehicle as the sword in the back seat moved it side to side like he's searching for something. The swords up in the front looked worried, almost like they're expecting something to happen. The now slightly visible, slightly oversized Jeep started to casually pass the mountain. The Dracens' eyes dilated as they preyed on the moving car, as their eyes began to glow various eye colors in the dark. Some blue, some red, some green, some magenta. Rune had bright emerald green eyes. Raz had light blue eyes, and Miriam had red eyes, all piercing through the darkness. One by one, the Dracens swiftly flew straight up, like missiles launching out from the ground rapidly, with their wings briefly illuminating yellow before quickly fading out back into darkness. They were so high up that it was impossible for the swords to spot them, especially with the snowstorm occurring in the canyon, almost 1,000 feet below. The car still slowly drove through the snowstorm, and the swords looked slightly tense, but the one driving began to relax. You know, I think we might actually be fine. Suddenly, the entire Jeep was quickly lifted upward from the front hood, pointing the back straight up, and slammed down back onto the snowy road, causing the entire Jeep to explode as the sword in the driver's seat and the back gunner flew out, while the one in the passenger seat has been completely dismembered upon explosion. The head decapitated out the side window, and a few limbs dispersed out the vehicle every which way. Renethus flew away from the front of the Jeep, now in flames, back up to the mountain. After the two remaining swords got back up, Rune from up above on the summit commanded Raz and Miriam to rip the swords to shreds. Raz and Miriam dived down to the mountain's peak, all the way down to the snowy ground of the canyon as they flew, with their wings completely spread out. The sword driver struggled to stand as he began to clumsily stumble toward the weirdly shaped rifle, but before he could get to it, a Drayson flew right past his back, slicing him from behind as blood spewed out and toward the direction Raz was traveling in. The Soar was just about to fall onto his knees when another Drayson flew past him, slicing the Soar's torso in half with her left wing. Blood shot out from the lower half of the Soar like a geyser as the top half face planted into the snow. Miriam flew back up to follow Raz back up to the top of the summit to get ready for another run. The other and last Soar stared at the flaming armored car. Only a chassis remained as the fire covered it, illuminating the whole area in bright orange. The Soar knew he was in danger, so he quickly ran to grab the rifle and sprinted for his life away into the dark, cavernous ravine without any visibility. After hearing himself stomp on the snow very hard and quickly, he stopped wondering why the Draysons haven't come for him yet. Not seeing anything apart from the distinct octane bonfire, the Soar pointed the rifle out as he scarily and frantically turned from left to right, and then halfway around, and lastly, complete 360 degrees. He heard distant flapping and held his rifle far out in front of him. It was silent for a few moments, until a very brief distant scream was heard in the distance behind him. He looked and saw no shadows above the pitch-black mountains. In the almost black, starry sky. Then the loud shrieking noise grew closer to him with every half second as the sword dropped to slam his entire chest onto the snow to avoid the oncoming Drayson who swooped by. The wing just barely grazed the Soar's now slightly bleeding skull while falling to the snow. The Soar quickly stood up and opened fire randomly in the general direction he thinks the Drayson is. What sounded like a loud metallic chain mixed with a rapid fire 50 caliber gun sounded from the rifle as it let out bright purple bolts firing off into the distance as the Soar screamed in fear. In that exact moment, a pair of wings sliced apart the Soar's torso in an X shape as the Soar's 4 main body segments fell dead to the snow. Although the horrific sight couldn't be seen, you could still tell exactly how the Soar died just from hearing the unique shudder sound of both wings slicing right through him effortlessly. Rune's shadow flew back up to the top of the mountain, but before he could reach all the way back up, colorful bolts shot at the mountain and all around the canyon like lasers. There were hundreds of Soars on the left side of the ravine, firing their new purple, green, red, and blue firearms. Rune met with Raz and Miriam back at the top of the mountain as they hid behind a boulder, where a few purple bolts would strike and then shatter into little pieces as if they were crystals, while leaving molten hot holes in the rock. Rune looked concerned and panicked while holding his crew behind the shoulder. "Alright, I need you both to stay here. I am more suited for battles than you are. If anything happens up here, you just have to fight your way out, okay?" "I'll be fine," Rune said. "No! We're a team! You can't just leave us here!" Raz cried. "You will be better off up here. You're not in the front lines. I will come back. Remember your training," Rune said one last time before diving back down to the mountain along with the other Draysons to fight. Miriam saw Raz's left wing had a burnt hole near the tip of his webbing at the edge of his wing. "Raz, your wing!" Raz looked at his wing to see that he's been shot through. He started to hyperventilate over an injury that isn't even deadly. I've been shot. Raz repeatedly cried as he freaked out. You're okay, Miriam assured Raz. Rune flew right behind King Renesist along with many other Draysons in a diamond formation as they swooped down to the row of swords. They were being rapidly shot at with these new bullets made of crystals that looked like lasers. A few got hit by purple crystals and fell down into the ravine. Luckily, the snowstorm made it really difficult for the swords to shoot down the Draysons. Drayson swooped right by the swords, trying to slice them in half as they flew by, but only less than half were dead after the slicing flyby. The Draysons flew back upward as they cleared the area to get ready to loop back around for another attack run. A few other Draysons snuck behind a row of swords, firing at the Draysons above to slice them into little pieces. One Drayson pierced their claws into the back of one of the swords, fighting on the front lines on the edge of the canyon, lifting him up into the sky, only to let him go for the sword to fall to his death. The sword hit the edge of the cliffside of the ravine, in which the edge of the cliff was rocky enough to sever the head from the rest of the body, which fell down to the ravine. The head, upon landing on the edge and being decapitated, deflected from the ground and onto another sword's head, knocking him out. Blood gushed everywhere and splashed onto some of the swords shooting at the Draysons nearby. One group of swords shot red glowing crystal bolts at the Drayson who dropped their friend, and that Drayson was struck by them multiple times in a row as they fell into the snow above the ravine, just at the base of a mountain on the opposite side of where Raz and Miriam were. Rune landed by that Drayson to check on them, but their body was internally on fire. After seeing flames coming out from the inside of the Drayson's mouth, their eyes were bloodshot and looking in different directions like they already had been dead for hours. The flaming Drayson's body looked like it was slowly rotting as the fire suddenly escaped from the inside of the fallen warrior and causing their eyes to look like the eyes of the devil. Fire had spread to the outside of the body as the entire Drayson's body was suddenly covered in the ocean and fire, burning the fur off of their body while simultaneously burning the internal organs of the now deceased Drayson into ash. Rune felt terror as seeing such a sight and looking around, starting to realize that their situation was worse than he thought it would be. The swords were winning by a large amount. He saw other Draysons get shot by various colored glowing flares and falling to their deaths from the sky. Even one green crystal bullet instantly blew up one Drayson into a gory grenade that spread out into the sky like the most disturbing firework ever created. Rune couldn't bear the situation he was in, so he just froze in place. Then King Renethys defended Rune, just before being shot by a Sor, about to shoot Rune. Then grabbed Rune and carried him to hide behind the other destroyed armored car. "Kid, you gotta stay alert, you can't back down! We are dying! This has never happened in the history of this war! Well, even if it is worse than I could possibly imagine, we still have to fight for our land! We cannot lose!" After Renethys' reply, Rune stared off, trying to process what was happening. "Go, go, go!" Renethys yelled as he shoved Rune back into the battle. Rune saw there was a lot more dead Drayson corpses everywhere than ones who were still alive. And suddenly, a thought crossed his mind. Rune felt a sudden instinct to fly back up to the peak of the mountain they hid at to get to Raz and Miriam in time before the Drayson could get to them. So Rune quickly flew up toward the peak, but before even getting halfway up, he was suddenly out cold. Rune awoken to see it was dawn. The sun was rising in between the mountains to the right, and all around him Rune saw destroyed vehicles that were no longer on fire but still smoking. Many burnt Drayson skeletons and Drayson bodies laid everywhere. There were hundreds of them, laying dead on the snow. Other than all the dead bodies, Rune seemed to be alone. Not even the swords seemed to be here. It looked like the battle ended many hours ago. Rune knew he had to go up to the summit just to see if Raz and Miriam were still there and okay. So he flew up the side of the snowy mountain and up toward the whitish pink sky and landed on top of the summit to see the boulder they hid behind. Rune slowly walked behind the boulder to see if anyone was still there. He saw nothing but the snow prints of where they crouched for cover at. It's good enough to know they're okay, Rune thought after seeing no evidence of their death. Rune looked off into the distance toward the sun and saw that the swords have already begun a mass amount of construction in an area just outside of the mountain range. A far distant metal structure was being built in the shape of a weird oval in the flat snowy region. It had 2 engines attached to its backside, on Rune's right in his perspective. and the engines had wires coming out from the inside edge attaching to some sort of power box in the center of the ship that looked like the inside of an airship. Everything else was just framework. It looked massive, although being probably about 3 miles away, as it had slight fog mildly hiding the ship in construction. Rune dove down to trace the canyon to get back to the den. Rune glided into the ravine and cautiously looked up from the ravine as he flapped his wings to speed up. Rune hoped that they hadn't raided the den as he continued to glide down the ravine.